Hello, so good evening everyone, and thank you for being here today at Studium Generale Groningen, organized in collaboration of Hansa University of Applied Sciences and the University of Groningen. So for those of you who are here maybe for the first time, Studium Generale is a regular series of events that aims to make science more accessible for everyone and to organize multidisciplinary activities and lectures and films, debates, events that aim to make science more open and more accessible. And my name is Anna Mikhailovskaya. I will be a moderator for today's event. I am a postdoctoral researcher in political theory, also here at the University of Groningen, but Campus Friesland, so based in Leeuwarden. And my own research is in digital innovations, digital democratic innovations. So I study how can technologies be used for citizens' political participation. So today's topic is actually quite close to mine and quite close to my heart, because today we're going to be discussing with our speaker not just who owns our data, but also who controls it and what does it mean, not only in a social sense, right, but also in a political sense. Because who owns our data, it's not just a technological questions, it's also very much a political questions, because a lot of our institutions, right, a lot of our governments are nowadays very dependent on these big tech corporations that control a lot of the data, both personal and institutional, that surrounds our societies that are very highly digitized today. And our speaker today is Maxigas, an assistant professor from Utrecht University, who has a background in computational methods for media and culture studies, and who is also a co-principal investigator with the Critical Infrastructures Lab at Utrecht University, and he is going to give us a talk titled Alienation by Design, where he's going to talk about, who controls our data, what does it mean for our political lives and for us as citizens in this digital world that we're living in right now. So Maxigas, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. And thank you.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming tonight to learn about and discuss our dependency on big tech, but also our relationship with it. I hope that after this lecture you will have some tips, some ideas how you can feel better about your dependency on digital infrastructures. As Anna mentioned, I'm assistant professor of computational methods in Utrecht University, but I am also principal investigator in the Critical Infrastructure Lab that is based in University of Amsterdam and Utrecht University. We are actually 3 people leading the lab, which means that we don't have a big professor on the top who tells us what to do. I am leading the track on industrial standards. Niels ten Oever, my colleague, leads the geopolitics track, and Fike Jansen is researching the environmental aspects, specifically looking at data center policy. Myself, especially before joining the lab, and a bit also at the moment, I'm looking at hacker culture. I looked at the long-term trajectory of hacker collectives, so I will speak about that today a bit later as well. This is the book that I wrote with Johan Söderberg, my colleague. This is the Critical Infrastructure Lab. As you can see, it's very orange, and it's not just because of the national color of the Netherlands, but because we believe that orange is the color of infrastructure. So every time you go on the street and you see some orange, you know that something is going on. And actually there is a book about what does it mean, how orange is used in society. And it says that orange also has a kind of neoliberal aspect, where you are not told exactly what is the danger, but when you see the orange cones on the street, you have to figure out yourself what to do with this situation. But anyway, when you see people in orange overalls, you know that they are trying to do something with infrastructure, and that is why we have a uniform for our activities. But to shortly say something about what is the goal of the lab, we say that we research power and contestation in communication infrastructures, especially in order to think about, to collaborate on constructing alternative futures that center people and planet over capital and control. So we can say that's also one of the goals of this lecture. How I divided the talk is quite simple. I'd like to explain the title of the talk, what is alienation, why we chose alienation by design as the title for tonight, and then see how dependency on big tech companies affects institutions from the European Union to the International Criminal Court. And based on these examples, we can see what the problem is currently and how it is discussed. But if we look at some new problem in the world, it is often useful to look at how people who always had this problem approached it, what it meant for people who were most vulnerable, most affected by this problem. And I work a lot with activist groups, with self-organized anarchist collectives. And in fact, these collectives have always had an issue with dependency on big tech. Surveillance through digital infrastructures, of course, affects activists much more than everyday people. So the big idea behind, or the apropos behind this talk, is simply that what anarchists, digital activists, hackers have been saying for 30 years now, that it is not good to give your data to corporations who are motivated by profit, and also who are under the jurisdiction of the United States. And this creates more dependencies, more problems. It takes power away from the users, from individuals, from institutions. This issue have been repeated so many times in these circles without finding a big echo. Maybe after Edward Snowden in 2016, it became more prominent because Edward Snowden leaked these files that showed the extent of surveillance by the United States, the National Security Agency, the Secret Service in the United States, but also to the extent that the government is cooperating with companies in order to access users' data. I will continue the story how this became a problem, but so far my point is simply that now that even the European Union is discussing how to reduce its dependency on big tech companies, maybe it is worth to see how activist scenes have been addressing this problem for the last few decades. And then I will close the talk with summarizing and giving some concrete recommendations, what you can do as individuals, even as private persons, or what are the directions that are good to lobby for, to campaign for, in order to improve the adverse effects of dependency on big tech companies. So what do I mean by alienation by design? In the background, you see an infrastructure walk that was organized by one of our students at that time, Yang Kong. She's now doing a PhD in feminist AI. And the reason why I put this picture is because what we mean by alienation is that digital infrastructure is, for many reasons, characterized mainly by its invisibility. So when we say that our data is in the cloud, it sounds like it is nowhere. So this one infrastructure walk was about going on a tour to try to find our data and to look at the computer that has the data. And in the background, we have this skyscraper. It is one of the data centers. And how you know that it is the data center is that it doesn't have any windows. Probably there are some Windows operating systems inside, but the building itself is actually optimized for the flow of air to have more cooling. And indeed, so we can go out and we can find our data, but quite often we have to travel very far. And what I mean by alienation is exactly the situation where we don't know what is going on. We have no contact with the infrastructure that we rely on, and it is in somebody else's. I don't even think it's a problem that if our data is in somebody else's hands, I would definitely give my data to my brother and or to my friends. But the alienation comes in when you don't know these people who handle your data, or maybe you don't know them too well and you don't trust them anymore. And that's kind of the point where the public discussion is at the moment, that less and less people trust companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google to handle their data in a responsible way. So, yeah, I already tried to explain what is data cloud and alienation, but how I would summarize this is with a slogan that was popularized by the European Free Software Foundation, and they always say, they even have a sticker about this, that the cloud is other people's computers. And once you have this idea, you actually start to ask, all right, if it is not a cloud over my head, if it is a computer, then where is this computer and whose computer is this? So that's where these questions come up. And why this became a topic of public debate, why institutions started to pay attention is on the one hand because they started to have practical problems, but on the other hand it is also a question of culture, a question of trust. So when the second term of Donald Trump presidency in the United States started, it became quite quickly quite clear that the transatlantic alliance between European countries, especially Western European countries, and the United States is not as it is used to be. So we cannot trust the United States to stand for the interests of European countries and also European citizens anymore. And this geopolitical tension changed how institutions, but also how many individuals as well, started to look at what kind of services they use and whose computers are holding their cloud data. So this is the context, and this is why these questions are discussed now in big fancy places like this lecture hall, and not just in shady hacker spaces and squats in the corners of cities. So first of all, how top-down institutions, how big serious organizations experience this alienation. All in all, I would say that these top-down institutions embraced cloud computing. It was really the best thing for them because they didn't have to care about maintaining their own computers anymore. They didn't have to manage their network. They didn't have to pay a system administrator who knows more than clicking on buttons. But they could outsource all the things that they were not, that were not their core business to a company. And of course, these turned out to be companies based in the United States, and we call them in academia the hyperscalers, because what is really special about these companies is the scale on which they can manage computation. Of course, with the scaling comes all the claims about efficiency, so they would say that nobody else can give you such cheap and such reliable computation. Now, overall, my criticism of this way of argumentation is that while this is true, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon can provide maybe even just better, more reliable, and cheaper services. But in fact, what they provide is a super complicated, really intricate infrastructure that has really serious environmental implications as well in terms of the natural resource consumption. But in any case, technically, it is such a high-tech thing like a rocket that most institutions, even if you look at universities, actually don't need the high-tech space rocket science technology that these hyperscalers offer. So universities used to be these places where you actually had system administrators. The University of Amsterdam was the first place in the Netherlands that connected to the global internet network in the 1980s. So universities used to be centers of technical excellence, and that meant also that they could, for example, provide email addresses to the people who worked at the university. If they could do high-tech, if they could do computation about how, if they could simulate the universe and do scientific computing, then they were also able to actually maintain some mailboxes for their staff. And what is happening now is that in most of the universities in the Netherlands, it is very hard to find one worker who knows how to maintain a mailbox in the contemporary information environment. And that is not because maintaining a mailbox is something that we have to buy from Silicon Valley companies because they worked out how to do it. It is because at the universities, in the computer science department, what we teach students is how to use these hyperscalers. We don't teach them how to run a mailbox anymore. So both the knowledge, but also the physical infrastructure, the servers, are disappearing from the universities, and they are ascending to the cloud. It is a very religious, very metaphysical process where the physical objects that hold our data are going far away from us, and it gets harder and harder for the user to see the computer. So there's an artist who is making a list of the demands that users should put against system administrators, and the first one is the right of the user to see the computer. And that's the kind of direction that I'm suggesting now. So the Critical Infrastructure Lab have put out a report. It was authored by Corinne Kaas, one of our fellows, which is called Clouds over the Netherlands, Preserving Public Interest Governance in the Era of Hyperscaler Clouds. So you see the hyperscalers are coming back here, and they are the ones delivering the clouds. This report is about a story about an organization that is keeping track of domain names. So for example, rug.nl, is the website address that stands for the University of Groningen's website. Somebody has to keep track of who has which of these addresses, and in the Netherlands, the .nl addresses are managed by the SIDN Foundation. Now, SIDN Foundation in 2024 had this great idea that they will move with the time and they will be up to date with their technology. They will develop a system for registering and keeping track of domain names that will be based on Amazon Cloud Services. And this became really a big scandal with people from the lab also did as much as they could to raise awareness about this. Finally, it has been discussed in the Dutch parliament, and the parliament who gives actually the mandate to the SIDN Foundation to manage the domain name registrations started a dialogue with the foundation whether it is really a good idea to migrate this infrastructure, keeping track of Dutch domain names to a cloud managed by an American company. And at the moment, at that moment, the argument from SIDN was that it is impossible to do this in a way that is not reliant on Amazon, because Amazon provides such a high-tech technological environment that is really undisposable. It is really necessary for having an up-to-date infrastructure. There are two arguments against this reliance on Amazon. One is that SIDN Foundation have been doing this work for decades, even before Amazon really started and got into cloud computing, and that worked so far. So there is really an empirical proof that they can do it without Amazon. But the second argument is that after this discussion happened with the Dutch government, they started a new tender, invited the industry for the Dutch cloud computing, the Dutch data center industry for consultation. And at the moment, they are in conversation with 3 Dutch cloud providers, 3 local companies, and these companies say that if they get the specifications, they can provide this service. So finally, what will happen with the domain name management is that it will not be in Amazon Cloud, it will be actually distributed between 3 local companies. And I would say that that is a good outcome, but also shows that serious organizations that are managing essential infrastructure, essential digital infrastructure in the Netherlands have doubts about cloud computing, and that is also recognized on a political level. A second example is the International Criminal Court. That was also a case that have been in the newspapers a lot. As you know, the International Criminal Court was the one grew out of the organization set up for the Nuremberg trial after the Second World War. And it is an international organization that is essential for example, at the moment, issuing arrest warrants, deciding that in Palestine there is a genocide at the moment, and issuing arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu, but also against Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine. Of course, then what happened was that this organization, just like a lot of other organizations, were totally managing their infrastructure using Microsoft services. When Donald Trump became president, he issued an executive order that sanctioned the International Criminal Court because of their verdict on the genocide in Palestine. And that meant that Microsoft was barred from providing these services to the criminal court. What the court said is that they store their evidence and they do all their email communication over Microsoft services. So what they are doing now is that they are switching over to a free software-based system that is perfectly independent from Microsoft, that is developed in Germany, especially for managing public affairs for the public sector. So these are two examples of organizations, but maybe we don't have to go so far. We don't have to take so alienated examples where I try to explain to you what is a domain name and domain registration. We can just look around, and the University of Groningen or my universities, the University of Utrecht and Amsterdam, they're also reliant on Google and Microsoft services. So I could ask you to put up your hand if you have a Microsoft or a Google account, but I'm quite sure that most of the people in the room have a lot of information that they wouldn't want to lose, and that is already in the hands of these hyperscalers. So there is also a campaign going on for universities to migrate away from Microsoft and Google. There is an open letter going on, and this is discussed by the Association of Dutch Universities. So, meanwhile, in the underground, I'm also volunteering as system administrator in a collective that provides digital infrastructure for activist groups around the world. And because of this, I know that bottom-up collectives, anarchist groups, never trusted cloud computing. There was no issue. There was sometimes there was a discussion, for example, in occupied social centers, in squats, where people are very political about not eating meat. So they have a vegan community, and they would never go to the McDonald's to have dinner, because McDonald's stands for capitalism and stands for oppression, and McDonald's is a big evil corporation. But still, many anarchists and many squatters would use Gmail, the Google email service, for their emails. And then we would have to go around and tell them that going to eat in McDonald's is the same as having an email address with Google. So this has been a discussion, but really, because activists always had a mistrust of the government, especially the United States government, but also a mistrust of giving away their computers, it is actually in activist circles that this tradition of how to run an email box kind of survived. And these collectives have not just run their own infrastructure, but also offered it on a donation basis to anybody, not just, often not just activists, but also members of the general public. So there are some examples on this slide. I will explain shortly why I chose these particular examples, but I could have brought hundreds and hundreds of others. I guess many of you have heard about the free software movement that began with people refusing to make software a product, a commodity that is bought and sold in the market. And the idea was that free software should be working in the same way that scientific results work. So in science, there is a tradition of writing up your insights and sharing it with your peers so that your peers, other scientists, can build on your results. In the free software world, this is how people write programs. They publish their programs, but they also publish the source code so that other people can develop further the results, the work that they have produced. Inside the free software movement, there is a little group in France. They are called Framasoft, and they took upon themselves to find alternatives for all the different Google services. So whatever Google offers, let it be calendars or file sharing or mailboxes, Framasoft will go and try to replicate in the free software way, with software that is available for everybody, but also providing services using this software that are under the control of the Framasoft group. And they have this cute website with these fluffy pictures I used on this slide. And you can go there and you can use these services for free. But since they have costs, it is also actually good if you make a donation when you do use these services. And maybe this is where, of course, people say, if it is for free, then you are the product. So what we have to see is that the collectives that I'm talking about here operate on a solidarity basis, where people who have more money, for example, the German anti-fascist movement always have like very good money and stable donations. They finance a lot of services, which means that, for example, feminist groups in Latin America can get these services for less money because they are in a harder position when it comes to getting money, having access to resources. So that's about Framasoft. Their quest is to find an alternative to each and every service that Google provides and provide it for free to people. Then there are radical servers, which are politically more conscious, more on the anarchist ideological side. From them, thisroot.org is have strong political commitments, but still open to the general public. So at the end of the lecture, I will suggest, if you are convinced by my lecture, then you go home and you touch the television screen. Then you go home and you open an email address in a provider that is not from a US hyperscaler. And for example, you can go to the thisroot website and you can ask them to make you an email account. I included riseup.net because they are a collective based on the United States. So we can see that this kind of movements even exist in the land of the hyperscalers. And Outsourcing Inventati is, thisroot is actually based in the Netherlands. I didn't mention that. So if we talk about what is the distance between us and our data, then that's another argument why thisroot is a good example of this, a good choice, a good alternative to the US hyperscalers. So I chose Outsourcing Inventati, which is an Italian collective, because they are not just doing great work, providing great services to anarchists, but they also do documentation. So they published a book about the 10 years of history of hacking and media activism, about their own stories. And actually why this book is interesting and I would say important, but I have vested interest here because I wrote the introduction. But in the introduction, why I say that it's a very important book is that it is not just about the anarchists with the computers who provide the emails. In their 10-year history, this collective also documents the history of social struggles in general in Italy, because it doesn't matter if it is about anti-nuclear campaign or if it is about queer activism or if it is about abortion rights. If the police has a problem with an activist group, they know where to look for information. They go to Outsourcing Inventati. So every time there is a big social conflict, Outsourcing Inventati is there in the front line because they are the ones that provide the digital infrastructure for these movements. And in fact, this is why I advise you to rely on anarchists because they have an established track record of not giving any information to the state, not giving any information to the police, and respecting individuals' rights. And I cannot say the same about Amazon and Microsoft and Google. So on the one side, that's the historical book about 10 years of anarchist digital services. On the other side, that's the Orange Book, and that's also from Outsourcing Inventati. And why I think the Orange Book is interesting, because they try to document the technical setup of their infrastructure. So if today you want to know how to run reliable and privacy-respecting services that are different from the cloud offerings of the hyperscalers, then you can read the Orange Book and you can learn it from Outsourcing Inventati collective. So there are not just collectives that provide the underlying infrastructure, that run the servers or provide services. There are also people who work on specific websites, and I linked a few here, but what I'd like to highlight now is radar.squad.net. Radar.squad.net is a calendar. So it is simply a website where you can find events that are organized by people who don't want to put them on social media. Because I'm not sure how you found out about this event. I hope you read it in an email newsletter. But I can also imagine that maybe you saw it on Instagram or Facebook, and it has been circulating in social media websites, which are, of course, most of the time also based in the United States, also making money for capitalists in that country, and not paying a lot of taxes here, but also profiting from users' information. So people who don't want to use social media to actually reach publics, to invite other people to their events, can put it up on radar.squad.net, and then it becomes a kind of directory now hosting tens of thousands of events and working in some specific cities in a really great way. I won't talk about the other services because it would become quite repetitive. I'd like to start to talk about what is to be done. Because I hope I convinced you, I showed how this is a problem for organizations, how activists have been actually addressing this problem since the beginning and built a track record on how to deal with it. So I would say that individuals should simply start learning about what are the infrastructures that they depend on. This is why I'm also organizing infrastructure walks where we go on the street and we do a kind of guided tour. It is a bit like bird watching, but with spectrometers. So we can measure the frequencies of the antennas, or we can look at, we can hunt for Wi-Fi routers on the street. But also, that's why I'm giving this talk, and that it is true, in order to address our alienation from technology, we have to take a step towards it. We have to go closer, and we have to challenge the invisibility of the cloud infrastructures. And that means asking a few questions, such as, where is my data, and do I trust the people who have power over it? Do I trust the country whose laws apply to handling my data? And then the next step would be what I already advocated, to rely on local services, but also services that you honestly believe that you can trust. If it is, and that is where I would say that if an email address is provided by the local church where you go every Sunday, because you can actually identify with that church, you know those people. If they give your email contents to the police, then you know where to find them. Then it is good. I'm not saying that everybody should have an anarchist system administrator like me. I'm saying that people should have other people who are handling their data that they can trust, in the same way that they can trust their grocer, that their grocer is not putting poison in the food that they buy in the shop. So that's why I wrote local, organic, and trustworthy digital services. And I will have some recommendations about what you can do if you don't want to rely on shady activist people who always wear black. Then we are also not just, as individuals, we are not just having our personal email box, maybe our social media accounts, but also we are part of workplaces, bigger organizations. So what these bigger organizations should do is, once again, start to rebuild the pool of technical knowledge that is in the organization. And also just simply bring back the computers from the United States and put it instead of the second toilet. I'm sure that in this university there are many places where we could fit some computer that could host some email boxes. And once again, how hyperscalers sell their products is like as if these would be indisposable. But in fact, 40 years ago, we still had a university. 100 years ago, we still had a university. And these universities worked. It is untenable to say that without these high-tech cloud services, it is impossible to operate a university. And on the other hand, these services are not that complicated. What I want as a scholar, as a professor, is not really to have some amazing algorithm that only a few companies in the world can provide me. I want to share some files with my students and my colleagues. I want to send messages to them, and maybe I want to have some real-time chat service. But this is not something that has not been solved. For example, in the history of computing, there is the mother of all demos. That was an event where they showed video conferencing first, and that was decades ago. Video conferencing already worked then. So we don't need technology from 5 years ago. Even with technology from the 1970s, we can actually do everything that we need every day to run a university. And of course, then, if we need really specialized services, we have the university where we have a computer science department where apparently there should be people who know how to do this stuff, right? If they cannot, then they would have to learn it. And that's very good, because the European Union at the moment is trying to have industrial policy. And what they call industrial policy at the moment in the European Union is that we have to catch up with the United States, or we have to be leaders in some areas by copying other countries, such as India. So instead of digital infrastructure for citizens like the India stack, now we can have the Euro stack that will have digital identity and digital payment systems integrated all over Europe. This is fine, but if Europe wants to thrive, it is not about copying some other things that have already been done. That will never lead to catching up with anything. That just means following. And instead of following, what Europe should do is implement services in a different way. And maybe this different way could be the way where we have trustworthy, distributed, localized services. So as an individual if you have an email, if you still have an email address, what you can do is switch your email box or your other digital services, your website, your file sharing service, to some other providers that are not based in the United States, that are not these few United States hyperscaler companies. I put this route here exactly because it's a Dutch alternative, Framasoft because they have a wider range of services, and as I said, they are based in France. But let's say if you don't trust the activists, you can go to Greenhost, that is a perfectly normal Dutch company, still based in Amsterdam, and if you talk to them, they are very happy to provide mailboxes, file sharing services, chat services for a fee as a normal billed service, just like a telephone company would provide a telephone service to you. Of course, when people say that these services are for free, as I said, it's very important to support these services according to your means. And maybe that's when we can talk about these services as utilities, as something like the electricity that everybody should have access to, and that should be built in a way that should be priced in a way that is affordable to people. Okay, so in conclusion, I put a quote from J.G. Ballard, British novelist. He says that the environment is so full of television, party political broadcasts, and advertising campaigns that you hardly need to do anything to bring down the system. So my point is not that we have to fight against hyperscalers. I really think the hyperscalers are becoming increasingly untrustworthy. People start to, and even big serious organizations start to have more and more problems with them. I don't really feel it's important to bring them down because they are just crumbling. What is important is to build alternatives in order to have a better life for ourselves. And in order to do this, I don't even follow the framing of these issues as digital sovereignty or strategic autonomy, because these are the terms that are used also by academics, but also by politicians to discuss these matters, because I don't think that the whole point is to increase the power of the Netherlands or the Dutch state to determine their course. I think it's important to empower people, but also not just empower people in this country, but also in other countries. And that's why if we have to talk about something digital, I propose to talk about digital sovereignty, digital solidarity. And this digital sovereignty should be at appropriate scales. And when I mean these appropriate scales, I mean exactly the example where if you go to church every Sunday, maybe your church could offer a mailbox to you. Maybe those are the people that you would trust with your data. If you are part of a neighborhood, or if you live in a city where you are in, you like how the municipality is handling public affairs, maybe they are the ones that should provide this kind of services. And some of these services would have to be either provided by the state, or as with the example of the .nl domain names, the state at least would have to make sure that services are accessible to citizens which are not outsourced to other companies, because simply our data, our computational infrastructures are too important for us to have them in untrustworthy hands. Thank you.
Yes, so now just an update, then now Maxigas and I will have a short discussion, and then we will also take Q&A from the audience, obviously. So first of all, thank you for this great lecture. It was very, very inspiring, and I don't know about people in this room, but I am quite convinced of a lot of the points that you made. But speaking of that, so what I want to start with is that, of course, as I said, like a lot of those points are very convincing, right? Of why we should switch from this, like using these hyperscale platforms to this more like local maybe solutions, to this more low-key technologies. But how do we actually make this shift, and who should be primarily responsible for that is my first question. Because of course you made quite a big emphasis on the individuals, right? So individual choices that, yeah, like switching from Gmail to other like email domains, maybe choosing for like a better alternatives. But in practice, we see quite often that, yeah, even when people genuinely believe that that's a better solution, right? In practice, once they go home, they're like, okay, but like all my family is using like Google, or my grandma is on WhatsApp, and she doesn't know how to use anything else. How do you how do you push society towards this switch? Who should be responsible for that? Is it like mainly the individuals that you see like pushing for this? Should it be organizations? Should it be the governments that should be, or is it like an interaction of everything? How do you see this? Yeah.
Thank you. So who should be responsible for managing the switch away from the hyperscalers? That was the question. And indeed, I tried to talk about this in the lecture as a kind of open question. But if we want to go deeper into it, I have to say that there is a community, there is a scene of international organizations, institutions, that is called internet governance. Yeah, I would call it the internet governance scene. So these include people like the SIDN who take care of the domain names. These include international organizations like the ICANN, the ICANN, who do the same job on a global scale. And these are the organizations that should, first of all, promote a different kind of internet, just because they are the ones who came up with the basic standards that made the whole development of the internet possible. And I mean, this is why I'm leading the research track at the Critical Infrastructure Lab that is focused on industrial standards, because I do think that standards have a big role in this switch. And that we can see in the difference between email and WhatsApp, for example. So if you go home and you switch to another email provider, then you should still be able to send email to anybody who uses Microsoft or Google. And that is because email is an open standard, is a well-defined international standard documented by the Internet Engineering Task Force. And as long as all the different providers adhere to this standard, everybody who uses this technology can communicate with each other. In the same way that I can send post to any country, and if that country has a post office service, they can deliver my mail. But WhatsApp is not based on an industrial standard, and that is a problem because WhatsApp users can only communicate with other WhatsApp users. And that is an issue where indeed there is a network effect. The more users are already on the network, the more precious, the more interesting, the more useful it is for each individual user. And indeed, if I start my own chat service that is not compatible with any other chat service, it will be very boring because I can only talk with myself. So in this case, individuals have a hard time escaping these walled gardens, but it is really the mission of larger organizations to, for example, regulate chat services to provide a compatible interface. And indeed, this is happening on the European Union level. There are many of these conversations. For example, the Digital Services Act is about this. So I don't want to put the responsibility on the individuals, but I also don't want to give the impression that you can do nothing about this because you are little people and individuals will not change. It is true that in order to change this situation, there has to be a critical mass. But on the other hand, I tried to point out that since decades, little communities have been living outside the cloud. And there is life outside of the cloud. There are people on the other side of the wall. And you can go and you can meet them.
Thank you. So to summarize, basically, individuals do have a responsibility to try to switch, but at the same time, organizations have the responsibility to try and provide them the infrastructures to be able to do this switch. Yeah. And if I can follow up on this briefly, do you kind of see a promising movement in this regard in the last years? Do you think people are becoming more aware, or is it also more of a problem? Because now, of course, it's impossible to not bring up AI, I think, in any kind of conversation on technology nowadays. So now with the emergence of tools like ChatGPT, for instance, right? Again, very much US-based, and we see like a lot of LLMs alternatives emerging in Europe, but they're not nearly as popular as, for instance, ChatGPT. Do you see that as something problematic, or do you see a shift, like a promising shift in this direction, that you see more and more people switching to these technologies that lower alternatives?
Yes, I do see that with the cloud, there is a moment where the mythology that was holding together the cloud businesses is starting to fade and starting to crumble. And then people talk about the AI bubble as well, that so much money have been invested into this, and a lot of the investment is starting to be circular in the financial sphere. And I find that super funny because that's the same problem that is that we have with content on the internet, that a lot of the websites are nowadays written by large language models, but they are also used to train large language models. So in the hacker scenes, we talk about the AI eating itself and digesting itself, and then this means that the quality of the content is just going down. So even with the normal search engine, it is harder and harder to find good answers that are not just the copies of the copies of the copies mixed together. So there is a lot of enthusiasm at the moment for AI and large language models and machine learning. And that is, once again, based on the idea that there is one way of doing AI, in the same way that cloud is just a way, which I would say a bad way to do computation. I'm not against using machine learning, but I do think that there are many different ways to have, there are many different AIs that we could have, and it is possible to develop other kind of AIs that are not constructed technically in a way that privileges very few actors that have access to large amount of capital. Whether people switch away from this or not, I would say they do. Even large companies are trying to do as much AI operation, as much data processing on the local devices as possible. So even like, for example, Samsung, that is making a lot of mobile phones, is trying to make mobile phones and set up services in a way that, for example, when you do translation, it is not happening in the cloud, it is happening on the local mobile phone. And that also means that we don't need to run these models on ChatGPT servers, but we can run them on even quite small, quite stupid computers. And there are more and more people who try to use small language models for very specific tasks and to localize their AI services. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you don't need a large-scale LLM for everything, indeed. And nice to hear somebody having a more positive outlook. You know, there is a lot of dooms talk in the technology community about, you know, AI is going to kill us all, and that's the end of it. So it's nice to hear that you have a different view on that. But so to follow up, I think my next question would be a little bit, so if we do step away from this like hyperscale infrastructures, right, there are probably still, of course, as you correctly said, like universities, other institutions, they functioned before without these hyperscale platforms, so they can function without them again. But at the same time, there are probably certain trade-offs that come with this switch, right, from this like hyperscale to lower scale, like more accessible, more grassroots technologies. So what kind of trade-offs, what kind of limitations do you see? Are there some things that we would potentially need to give up? What are your thoughts on this?
So from an end user or from an adopter perspective, the difference between hyperscaler services and let's say services on a local scale is that hyperscaler services are a bit like what we see with the Apple products. They are designed for a global consumer in a way that is supposed to work for everybody. Which also means, of course, that everybody have to learn how to use the design language of Apple, the icons of Android that were designed by Google designers. So we grow into these services. And then we start to be familiar with all the bugs that we have to jump around and where you have to click when it doesn't work and how to press the reset button and start the computer again when it is not working. Well, in my experience, when you go to local services, you will have more of this. So you will have to become more of a user, know the little cracks, know where to step and not to step, and be more familiar with your own technology. But I don't see this as a problem because that's exactly what alienation is about. When you forget that you use a certain technology and you stop to become a user, you don't see the computer anymore. You are just doing computation as you go about your everyday life. And of course, that sounds, my students would always say it's convenient. And I'm really surprised by a generation whose main value, its main desire is convenience. When I was young, we wanted drugs and rock and roll and adventures. And then maybe the kind of infrastructure that we should have is this kind of infrastructure that is maybe not perfect, but it's actually exciting and maybe interesting to use. So there are trade-offs, and the trade-off is that local services are not good. They are not as polished. But I'm also not convinced that we actually need, in order to have a good life, to have technology that works perfectly. And that's because when a technology works perfectly, that means that a lot of other people are having a shitty life making it work for us. And I don't want all those people to actually suffer while I have this illusion that everything works seamlessly because somebody behind my back is having power over me and making money from my data.
Okay, thank you. And so maybe that would also increase digital literacy then, right? Like in your idea, if you kind of have to be closer to these technologies and have to figure out a bit more closely how they work to make that. Do you? Yeah.
So maybe in conclusion, I could say that we live in a world where our relation as a civilization with each other, but also, let's say, with the earth, is a technological relation. And unfortunately, that means that if we want to actually experience our life, not just even like having more control over our life, but to live our life in a meaningful way, we have to look into what is technology. So I'm not asking the question of technology because I'm interested in computers, but because I do believe that the question of technology is the question of our times. And whether we survive as a species, for example, depends on what kind of relationship we can cultivate with each other and with the earth. And this is a relationship that is by now always already a technological relationship.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more? Yes, yes, okay. So one more short question from me and more like also of a personal interest from my side. So do you think any of these low-tech technologies can also be used for kind of democratic, like political purposes to kind of increase citizens' influence on, political decision-making in any way? Because we see a lot of initiatives nowadays of like the governments trying to involve citizens more a little bit in decision-making, like collecting citizen proposals on, for instance, how to spend a budget in a certain neighborhood. They did an initiative like that in Groningen, I think, in one of the neighborhoods, and that was done via a digital platform. So how do you see kind of the role of low-tech solutions in that, and who should be kind of responsible for that? Just a quick question.
Yeah, so in terms of the technology that actually makes the basic mechanics of our democracy work, such as in the way that we manage elections, it's quite funny that in many countries, when you look at how the switch from paper voting to electronic voting machines happened, you find hacker groups that are supposed to be for computerization campaigning for voting with pen and paper. And that's because hackers know that once you have a computer, you can definitely hack that computer. There is no such a thing as a secure computer. In the Netherlands, it was a group called Hippies from Hell, a very prestigious old hacker group, where Rob Gronrijp and friends took the first secure voting machine, and as far as I remember, they managed to play the Doom shoot 'em up game on this voting machine, showing that you can really change the software of the machine. So I do find it important that we don't go high tech, for example, in medicine, in the technology that upholds our fundamental rights. But at the same time, for example, Hippies from Hell also made the digital city, the digital stat project, which was about participatory budgets, and that was already in the 1990s. And I would say that that's also super important for people to have on these different scales, from the street to the neighborhood, some kind of power, and that could be technologically mediated over how they set up their lives. And indeed, technology can help with that, but once again, it doesn't have to be a the best technology. It could be just a chat group. It could be just a forum. And there are people who I call cyberneticians that tell you, oh, if we connect the communication in the right diagram, then democracy will automatically result from this. And then we have this software that will deliver democracy. And the problem with this is that we don't just need structures, we also need values and ideology. And every software has values and ideology that come with it, but it's when we start to use it, this ideology becomes invisible to us. So we really have to reflect on what is the software that we start to use, because it already has values that it imposes on us. But also, if we want to advance politically, it is not enough to have better technology. We should also have better values and better relations between us humans.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I think it's time for the questions from the audience. So, any questions?
Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Yes. Need to test. Okay. Yeah. So as a student of Hans, we're currently using Microsoft for everything. Would you have any recommendations for students to be less dependent on that sort of things?
Sure. So first of all, you should join the campaign of different universities to cut ties with hyperscalers and specifically with Microsoft. That is one of the companies that is the most complicit in the genocide in Gaza. And I know that in many universities, including Groningen, many people actually care about this, and many students care about this issue. The discussion is usually about research projects that the university have. So when students demand the university that the university should cut ties with organizations that are complicit in genocide, they should include Microsoft as one of the biggest organizations, because in terms of money, actually, Microsoft gets more money from Groningen University than any of the research projects. Most of these research projects are paying Groningen University, but Groningen University is paying Microsoft. So as a client, it should be also easier to cut ties, and maybe even cheaper. But also as a student, you can ask your teachers why you have to use Microsoft, why they cannot just send an email, why the email have to be a Microsoft email. And when you work with your fellow students, you can organize yourselves in using technologies that are not part of the Microsoft ecosystem. Actually, that's what most of the teachers are doing, because with Microsoft, it is a bit different than with, let's say, Google, because Google has good engineers. But Microsoft services, everybody hates. So they are really imposed by the organization. So every worker in every university will be very happy to work with you to sabotage these systems because they hate them like hell. With Google, it is harder to get students to drop their Google addiction, because Google services are actually properly designed in a lot of cases. That's why Groningen goes for Google. This was the advertisement, you see?
In the first answer of her question, you were talking about a basic service which is sending a message to somebody else through email. on a standard protocol, etc. So this is a clear answer. How do you think about, you were making the comparison with postal services. So the postal service can be quite shitty, your own local postal service, but it has to be delivered in the other country or in the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think, what do you think about the problem that the big hyperscalers are setting up local services for email more complicated because they have more regulations on being not on spam list, etc. and DMARC stuff, etc. And how, what do you think about how could we guarantee that you are not automatically placed on the shit list by Microsoft or another hyperscaler?
Thank you. Great question. Indeed. So when I say that it is not very difficult to operate a mailbox today, to provide a mailbox, that is really in a technical sense. So to set up the server is very easy. You can read the documentation and you can do it in a day. If you can configure your home router, then you can go home and tomorrow you can have your own mailbox. The problem starts when you start to send email to, once again, Microsoft and Google, and then they say, who are you and why are you sending messages to me? This message conforms to the technical standards, but I never saw this domain name before. I never saw this computer sending emails before. You must be a Russian hacker or a Chinese persistent threat actor. I'm not accepting your email. Then you get on a blacklist, and maintaining mailboxes today, in terms of the number of hours, is mostly fighting these US hyperscalers to take you off their blacklists. This is indeed an issue. And I mean, in terms of the current European Union policy debates, what is happening here is that these hyperscalers act in the role of gatekeepers to a market. And that means that actually they should be regulated through international organizations, even through the FCC in the United States, but definitely European Union could promote international connectivity through protocols and international standards by lowering the level of entry for small email providers to the email space. And I do think that even individuals can raise this issue, but the solution is something that needs regulation because it is becoming untenable. Because anybody can operate email, but these are the biggest email providers. So in the way that they provide email is becoming the de facto standard of providing an email. And that is against the whole principle of how not just a rule-based international order, but a technical connectivity based on open standards should work. No.
Hello. Yeah. I have two questions. The first one slide, you were, the question was, what can everyone do? What can individuals, organizations do? And then oh yeah. No, I think it was number one or, oh yeah, this one, yeah. No, exactly. And then the first point, get informed and use local, organic, trustworthy digital services. Organic, do you mean with little dependencies, or what is meant by that?
Yeah, we can also say that there is a supply chain that is behind the services that we use that is preferably shorter than larger. But actually, that's not what I meant. The first time that I heard about technological sovereignty. It was people who modeled, it was bottom-up activist groups promoting technological sovereignty in Catalonia, and they modeled it after food sovereignty, where food sovereignty is the ability of a people to make decisions about what kind of food they want to eat and who is making that food under which conditions. And many hackers believe that you can have the same, you can ask the same questions towards technology, that the opposite of alienation is when you can make decisions about who is making, who is providing your technology, and whether that technology is healthy for you or not.
Which maybe a bit leads me to my second question, which was about, because, yeah, of course, I feel and sense and hear that you seem to be on a mission, and for you it's important that to get more independent from big tech, from especially from the US, but in general, as I've understood. And yeah, of course, on many levels might be understandable, and other levels there's a convenience aspect, of course. But yeah, isn't it at the end of the day, for individuals, for organizations, always also question of their own values? Then, for example, do they value privacy over maybe a bit more usability or stuff like that, or cost factors? So it should always be contextual, based on individuals or organizations, right?
Yes, sure. But when you say contextual, that's exactly the opposite of the Apple product, that is the product for everybody. So it is important, you can have different values in an organization, or very specific values, but the question is how to articulate those values. And it is easier to articulate those values if your service provider or your technology developers have the same values as you, or share the same context as you.
Thank you, first of all, for the talk. Very, very interesting. I think I'm asking more for like your opinion, because in one of the slides from the bottom up, I think the graphic in the background from the bottom up part, I saw the little Netflix icon as well on the left ship. And as someone who recently desperately tried to get away from Spotify for many reasons, I personally was aware there are alternatives for emails, there are alternatives for Google Docs or Microsoft Word. However, I was wondering if there's also bottom-up approaches when it comes to a generalized entertainment stuff. So I know there's piracy. As a German, I'm very, very, very scared of doing that. So I was wondering if you have any insights, if there, whenever it comes to music, any type of other like entertainment-related media, are there any options to go, to not use the big providers?
Yeah, I have to say that for this very lecture, there is a video recording that is being made. And I did try to find a PeerTube account where it is possible to upload this video, and I failed. So this is distributed video hosting and access to these to entertainment content is not a solved issue at the moment. And part of that is that it is one of the areas where you actually need more substantial resources than hosting mailboxes, because it is not just text. So, for example, personally, in the collective where I work, which provides digital infrastructure for activist groups, every time that we are approached by people who want to set up a video hosting service, we have to say that we don't have so big hard drives that they require. And of course, the alternative is the people who have the big hard drives are not the anarchists. They are another staple of the underground, and they are called the pirates. So they have really big hard drives, and they give away all this content for free as well. So if you search for torrent trackers, you know, torrent is like a big environmental phenomenon, like big wind and a lot of rain. So torrent trackers are the places where you can watch Netflix for free, but it is very good because they also have bills to pay to actually donate to them. And I mean, the same, where I see this really being solved by the underground in a spectacular way, is what are called the shadow libraries. So in both, I worked in 3 universities so far, and I always tried to convince the university to stop paying for journal subscriptions and to give money to, that was at that time the Science Hub, that was the best shadow library. But at the moment it's called Anna's Archive. And I encourage everybody to donate to Anna's Archive, because this is a place where you can find most of the academic books and most of the papers in one place. So it is kind of like the Library of Alexandria. We have all the knowledge produced by scientists, and you can actually access them. And that really works. It is banned in the Netherlands, so you have to use a VPN or the Tor browser in order to access it. But with 5 minutes on the internet, you can find out how to access Anna's Archive. You can find all the books there. And if you want to watch Netflix, then you will need to find some more closed websites, which are called the torrent trackers. That's where the good stuff is.
Well, if I could add one when it comes to music, because I worked with musicians and I know that as a legal alternative to Spotify without the shady ties, they really appreciate Bandcamp. This is just one thing I wanted to point out.
This is just a small addition to needing a torrent, a VPN or Tor or whatever to access NS Archive. You can also just set up another DNS, like instead of your well, DNS is the one that you use for like looking up a website to the actual location that it is. If you set it up on Android or whatever and just change it to a public one, such as Google or not Google, because we're here to not do that. Then it's just not blocked, you can just visit it. So you don't even need a VPN or whatever. You can just access the open web just without your provider, like Ziggo or whatever.
Very good. If somebody is interested in DNS politics, then come to me after the lecture. Because I have the feeling that it's a very small subset of the audience. So you can find me here.
Oh, yeah. So I think we're out of time, unfortunately, but maybe Maxigas will be willing to answer some questions afterwards. But thank you, everybody, for coming. And again, if you want to do the analogy of the bird watching, but the infrastructure walk that Maxigas mentioned also during his lecture, he's going to be giving one tomorrow here in Groningen from 1 to 2. And you can, there are still a lot of spots, some spots available. A lot maybe was a strong word, but there are still spots available, so you can sign up for that via Studium Generale website. So please do come and yeah.
Talk to me now.
Or you can, yeah, or you can also talk to Maxigas now. And yeah, let's give Maxigas another round of applause for this. Yeah.